Okay, so we're recording now.
Do you want to do the introductions? I usually do the introductions.
Sure. All right. So, welcome everyone to the Magician's Table. I am Amarin Nicole, also known as Lady Amarin, and with me is, of course, my great friend, Madame Desiree, with her Madame lips tonight. Nicole Desiree. And today we are talking about the topic of magic. So Nicole has had a lot more experience with researching and everything on this topic, and I'm just chock full of questions on this topic. So,
I said we like questions.
Yes, that's why we're here, right? I mean, pretty much it's like that's why we're doing this shit, because we got questions, and we figure other people do too. Um, so anyways, this is something that for me is as Nicole and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I'm getting all sorts of flustered because I was trying to do some more research on my own today, and I've tried to do this a little bit here and there over the years, and I just get so frustrated. I was reminded today why I get so frustrated, because everything on this topic is just so polarized, and it's you got and specifically I'm trying to look at it from a biblical perspective and see, okay, what is magic, how is that defined as, in our society as well as biblically, and all that goes with that. And I was watching some videos and reading some articles today, and again, reminded that, okay, you got the one side that's going to argue that, oh yeah, biblically speaking, it's totally cool and all this, and I'm like, well, okay, from what I understand, of the Bible, basically your entire statement is wrong. But then you go to the other side and people arguing like, oh yeah, it's, magic is so bad, and it's, it's all this and that, and, God is going to smite you down and all this. I'm like, well, okay. But based on what you just said and what, again, I know of scripture, like, you're like pretty much completely wrong too. It's like, both in context of scripture, and then also in like, well, you don't have an understanding of even the basics of metaphysics, much less, apparently anything else, except for basically anything that anybody knows that you can get from movies, or, kind of like what we were talking about last week of, the perception of psychics and all this kind of stuff. It's like there's that, what mainstream media, puts out there, and that's what we all know and think of as, magic and everything. And by the way, we're not talking about like the hat tricks and stuff like that tonight. Like, I know, right? I really want Nicole to pull her out of like, I got some cards here. Let me, is this your card?
Whole second act here.
As much as I love some of those, like, awesome freaking, magic tricks, that's not what we're talking about here. So anyway, it's a very frustrating topic for me because I want to know, I want at least some kind of insight, and so that I can make an informed decision. And this is the bottom line for me, is because I want to make an informed decision of where my lines are, because I'm trying to come at things, especially in metaphysics and everything, from a biblical grounding. And, so I want to make sure that, I don't cross any lines or anything. So it's, I was telling Nicole, it's like, I can't find anything that is worth anything. So I'm hoping today that Madame Desiree over here will have some insights for me that I can take away and then chew on, and also hopefully something that's helpful for you guys too. So
no pressure on my
right,
side.
no pressure. I expect you to have all of the answers and be correct. So
let me go grab my magic 8-ball. Camera on. Magic reel.
I love it.
Later.
Great. Okay. So like after we recorded the last episode on magic, it like for that whole next week, I was just going, that was very unsatisfying. That I
felt that too.
Did you really?
I felt that too. And I was just like, for me, I was like, I feel like the question hadn't been answered satisfactorily.
Yeah.
And I felt, well, during that whole thing, like I knew for myself, I felt off. Like I just didn't feel like I had hit the groove.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was going to miss the mark, but I also knew like, okay, I can't put off recording this thing anymore because I don't know when we would pick up the momentum again. So yeah, I felt that too. And it was hard. So then I started thinking like, well, we designed the schedule for this thing to kind of answer to that. And I think when we do the next one, we will pick it back up where it was and kind of swing back to some of the concepts.
Well, and that crossed my mind too, of like, okay, well, so many of these topics kind of bleed into the others and whatnot. But at the same time, it's like, man, if I just spent 2.5 hours watching that video and then still didn't get the answer, I'd be kind of like irritated. Like, even though it was still good information, I think it, like, from my point, like what I was, I guess, wanting to get out of that conversation, like, I kind of felt like the only thing, kind of bedrock that, answered the what is magic, question was your explanation of, their definitions of, the modern kind of definition of magic and the kind of the old school, but I was kind of like, it just seemed like it was, off, and like you were going in one direction and I was going in another direction.
Well, I felt that, and I feel like you wanted to pull it in the direction of answering like if magic is good or evil, depending on what it was.
Well, and I guess really, and I think probably it was just a disconnect mostly between us and communication, because I think I really wanted like some examples of, some actual examples of, and not necessarily good or bad, but just like, okay, what, when you're practicing magic, what is it that you're doing, what, and so I think when I finally was able to kind of convey that question to the point where you actually understood what I was saying, you know, it was at the end, and you're like, you know, we'll cover that in the next one and everything.
Yeah, because we've been talking for like 2
I
hours.
Right. I think it was we were having a disconnect in communication that day. And I think, yeah, if you were feeling off, and I wasn't so much feeling off as, I don't know, it might have been a fire day. I was maybe feeling a little extra feisty and unmoving. And I do notice that when I get too much of that energy, my communication skills drop. And I'm not as able to convey my thoughts and whatnot. So it you know, could be any number of those things. And like I said, you know, I'm not, of course, like blaming you by any means, but it just.
I think the other side of it is that there isn't going to be a satisfactory answer, because magic isn't what is perpetuated in like popular culture.
Right. And it's not just that one singular thing that can be pinned down to this is the only definition, explanation, whatnot of it.
It's, I mean, it's like, if we're boiling it down to the semantics, hey, maybe this can be like the addendum to the failed episode of Magic.
Oh, nobody's perfect, people.
Well, it's like, so the dictionary definition is that it has to do with like ritualistic ceremony that's tied into a religious or spiritual component. So it's the marrying of these two things. Of there's a spiritual side of it where there's a belief in something beyond yourself, and then the other side is that it's tied to ritualistic ceremony, of that the ceremony is performed in a specific way that can be replicated, but it doesn't mean that the outcome is necessarily replicated. It's just like the person doing the thing. The goal, of course, is to have a semi-predictable outcome, right?
Right, naturally.
So my argument then would be to answer what is magic. It's this marriage of spirit and action to produce something that is logically disconnected from real world steps. And I start answering that in the manifestation one, where the manifestation one, I think, was intended to break down an example of how to produce an outcome, because manifestation is about making things appear. And when we think about magic, we do think about making things appear.
And that's a good point too, that now, first of all, see, I can tell that I'm in a much better zone, because you just giving that definition again, like my brain kicked in and like, okay, I get it. You know, like I still want some kind of like, give me an example, you know, kind of thing, but
of ritual, I mean of magic. So let's see. I'm trying to think of like a good one, because my first inclination of magic is like, oh, you know, when you protect your house or cleansing a space. You know, some people might go through like a whole ordeal of stuff to cleanse their space. Or some people like me, who's just like, might just light some Palo Santo to just whatever.
Like, get the fuck out of here.
The hard part about that kind of example, though, is even though most of us, if we initiate that kind of ritual, it can be conducted without belief in something beyond yourself. And it can be conducted in such a way where it's not really clear if there's a shift in energy, but you're shifting your mood through
the practice,
sensorial effect. And that's a really hard one. The hard part about a lot of magic is that there's so much of magic that's easy, like practical magic that's easy to conduct, that's related to psychology. And I talk a lot about, or I when I talk about manifestation, I tend to talk about a lot of psychology, right? So if we're talking about something that's beyond psychology, right? That's really magic. So in most of the magic that I know of that I've studied have either come from Benabel Wen, that follows a Taoist tradition, or from varying paganist, Wiccan, what we think of as a
As
traditional
the
modern
witch,
witch,
right? Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, should be stated that anything that's paganist or Wiccan is modern, because the majority of the oral tradition or records have been systematically eradicated. And
Right.
anybody thinking that this is an authentic way of being is somewhat like misaligned from a certain amount of reality. And I wouldn't say it's 100% like that. Like, people in certain locations tend to have a deeper connection to oral tradition, where they're still practicing magic. So
Right.
that's the other thing. Like, folk magic is practice. Like, you'll find it in like Appalachian region, where it's like superstitions are still in existence, or like in Louisiana and New Orleans, where you still have like voodoo
Right.
things being passed down, or in England and certain parts of Europe where the witch hunts weren't quite as deep and prevalent as they were here. So I mean, there's that. I'm just throwing out there, like, if we decide to save this video, of like, there's so much misinformation and pretentious people in those communities saying that they have this exclusive power to give to you, and it's just not true.
Right.
But getting back to these like Taoist or pagan types of things. So when I started doing some of this manifestation work, in order to leave Long Island initially, I did rely on incantations. So an incantation in and of itself is not really connected to rationality. I shouldn't say reality. It was part of my reality, but
Right.
it's not. Simply speaking, a series of words. If you're alone, which I mean, I was, like, you're alone, or like I was outside when I was doing them. When you're doing that kind of thing, it's not a rational step. So like, let's say that the goal is to get a certain amount of money, and you just keep chanting a certain phrase. That in and of itself shouldn't result in more cash arriving in your hand or dollars ending up in your bank account, right? But if you do a magic spell, and then the thing that you called upon comes into your life, and you replicate that, and it has a consistent outcome, can you really dismiss it as simply coincidence? Then you could break down the situation of like, okay, well, what exactly happened after chanting this thing? But my argument to that would be, going back to the previous episode about energy, and I was talking about like how carving the runes, like that your chi, your energy is going into that stone, and therefore it's charged and like attuned to your energy, and it's attuned to its specific energy because of the letters. When you're like saying a magic spell or an incantation, the vibrations of your voice in addition to those words creates a unique frequency that's like going out. And then for me, there was a spiritual connection of making appeals to specific deities in relationship to the goal that I was trying to complete. And then for me, when I was in the moment of doing that, and I was recitating it to a magic number, so it's like I had a certain number of repetitions that I wanted to do. There's something static feeling getting closer to that magic number, that there was some kind of resonance around me that was happening. And it felt, there was something that felt within me and outside of me. That's really difficult for me to explain. Of, it was more than giving a speech. It was more than saying something. It felt like something was happening. And it resulted in completing the goal that I was appealing for. Like, it did happen. And for, like, in some cases, it happened in part through my effort and in part through luck. But that was also built into the incantation for me of saying, I will do my part. Can you honor my part that I'm doing too with meeting that goal? And this is something that I have been able to replicate for different reasons, like for different types of goals.
Right.
And there is a lot of spell work magic. If you look into hoodoo tradition, or voodoo traditions, a lot of those spells, you'll write a specific phrase on a piece of paper, write somebody's name, write somebody's birth date, and then something that you want to have happen to them. And then that piece of paper is charged with that intention, and then it's cast into something, cast into fire, sometimes boiled into sugar, in order to produce an outcome. And like that, those prescribed set of actions, it's understood that there's an appeal to something more powerful than you that can influence the real world. And I mean, of course, I'm leaving out the part of like, is this good? Is this evil? We're just talking
Right.
about the mechanics of
Right.
of
But yeah,
magic.
we did cover that too. There is good and bad, and it's,
And bad.
you know, yeah.
There's, and I think that, you know, if you're taking away the stigma from the word magic and really going back on that dictionary definition, I think, yeah, there is this good and bad magic. It's all intention. And almost everything that we do in life is, you know, endowed with intention, whether we're conscious of it or not. And and you see acts that can be labeled as magic across the full spectrum of religions, whether they're organized or folk religion, you know, whatever it is. And for me, it really is this ceremonious act that can be replicated, recognizing something beyond yourself, and that creates a result, and that we might not understand how it is. There is this, I should have brought this up in the video the last. There's this great conversation about magic in Lev Grossman's The Magician. I haven't seen the television show on Sci-Fi, but I read the Magician's trilogy. And one of the students, it might have even been the lead character, asked, well, what is magic? Like, what is it? And the professor said, when a carver's apprentice learns to be a carver, does he ask how the wood is made? Does the master carpenter know how the wood is made? No, he only knows how to work with the wood to make the table. And I think that there is an element of magic that we will never explain, never understand, of like what it is, but that doesn't mean we can't understand how to use it as a tool. That makes sense. So I do believe that there is this new so when I was saying, like, I think that magic is almost like a current of energy, and that we can like tap into it and manipulate it. I think that magic, or whatever the magical bridge is between like me spouting out the spell and creating the outcome, I do think that there is this thing, this like energy, this specific kind of energy, that has a neutralness to it, that's like a tool, like crystals. Each crystal has its own energy. I think that we're tuning into different frequencies, like when we do a Reiki healing session or something, or when you're cleansing your own aura, like there's a difference between your auric energy and the auric energy of somebody else.
Right.
The energy of a room, There's just this like chi, this life force, and then there's the dark matter in between. The dark matter is just the thing we haven't been able to define yet by science,
So
which is what magic is. We
Right.
can't define it.
Would you say, I mean, because listening to that, it's like it's all making a lot more sense in my brain. I'm, like I said, I think I'm just in a better place to
I think I'm in a better
work
place
my
too.
brain.
I think we're both just doing a better job today.
We'll do this episode 4.0 here. But so with that, like, kind of it's energy, it's kind of tapping into the energy that is around us and using it. So would you kind of think that like magic, like performing magic, would be tapping into that energy using the ritual, as opposed to tapping into it like with like your example of, let's say saging the house? Like some people I know have this whole giant ritual that they do with it, and yeah, I think you and I are both the same. We just light that shit and go.
I know, it's just like, oh man, it would be just like exhausting trying to do a bunch of stuff to cleanse a room.
Right.
I think I have.
So
an
would
analogy.
that be like magic and not magic, even though you're kind of doing the same thing, or no?
It's like the stars have aligned for us to finally have this conversation. I'm going to throw this at you and see if it makes sense.
Okay.
So the idea of practicing yoga is that it's not actually an exercise. It's supposed to be a philosophical way of life, a spiritual way of life. Like it is supposed to connect you deeper to yourself, deeper to the divine. However, if you go in a downward dog, would someone say you're stretching, or would someone say that you are in a yoga pose? Depends on who and where you are, right? A yoga teacher who's practicing it for spiritual reasons would probably look at you and say that you're stretching. Whereas, a Western yoga teacher who does like hot yoga in a studio would look at you and say that you are indeed practicing yoga. And I think that magic is falling on a spectrum like that, where there are the keepers, I want to say like the keepers of the faith, right? Like the keepers of tradition, maybe is the better term, like the keepers of tradition who have really honored those actions as sacred, are going to align themselves on the side of, you are not practicing magic and you're not fit to practice magic unless you have followed the tradition all the way. And then I think there are some people who are like, I'm throwing my Choku rays all over the walls and waving my Palo Santo around, and my house is now clear. Like, and I think that I think it's important to have that spectrum. I think it's important not to box it in. And that, in most cases, when you're like at the extremes, you're further from the truth somehow, or at least further from your own humanity. And that it's messy, right? And so I think that the person, if it's like art, it's going to be self-evident. If somebody thinks that by doing the minimal brush stroke of magic is performing magic because they make it so, it must be so. And if somebody who part of their religious ceremony of daily life believes that they aren't practicing magic by what their sense of worship is, then it's not magic for them necessarily, even if it's producing these mystical results. For them, it could just be that is their nature, that is their life, right? So I don't know.
Well, that kind of makes sense, and that's kind of actually, before our several conversations now on the topic, where I had kind of landed of its intention. It's, again, going back to it's a tool, so using energy, for me as an energy practitioner, I don't see, doing that, tapping into that natural, resource, is magic or, divination or anything like that. Any of those, buzzwords. Because that's not the intention that I put behind it, whereas, yeah, if I were staging my house with, the intention of this is, a magic ritual, so on and so forth, then yeah, more like it becomes that then, because that is the intention that I put behind it.
Yeah, I don't see you doing any like spell crafting kinds of
right.
boiling the pieces of paper in sugar.
Now, I have done some things where I'll write things down and burn the paper. And I do fully believe, and I heard this somewhere, I don't remember where, but and I loved it. And it said, it's something to the effect of words have power. That's why they call it spelling.
Yeah.
I loved that because, well, okay, I like, the whole, Practical Magic, one of my favorite movies, a lot. So I like, the whole magic thing, in the movies and all that kind of stuff.
I'm like such an uncool practitioner. I haven't seen The Craft. I haven't seen Practical Magic. I haven't seen any of those. I haven't seen the Harry Potter movies.
Now, okay, we can get past this whole disagreement of, or really it was an agreement of like the last episode not turning out right. But I'm sorry, if you have not seen The Craft, we cannot be friends. Okay. No, when you come to visit, we're fucking binge watching all that shit. Like,
maybe that's why I wasn't meant to watch it. You're supposed to initiate me.
Right.
Into the club.
We'll get into that ritual. We'll initiate you into the the magic movie watching family. Anyway, what was I saying? Spelling. Okay. So but I'm a word person. I love words. And I, even before getting into metaphysics, have always, well, maybe not always, but, for a long time now, understood and realized the power that a word, speaking words over somebody essentially, can have. And it's not just, of course I grew up in, church and all this. So you always hear that, oh, speak words over people, and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, what? But I get it now. Like the principle kind of in that is because words do have power. The energy, like you were saying, the vibration, the energy and everything, like it does affect things because again, everything is energy. It's the principle behind numerology and everything. It's that energy that is put out when you say certain words. And I love, seeing those examples of, you take the mayonnaise jar or whatever, and you put love on one and hate on the other or whatever. And, and I've seen it done with like plants and stuff too. I saw this really cool one with these kids that like put a couple plants up at a school and told the kids, like, every day you go love on, tell this one that you love it and tell this one that you hate it. That's all they did. The same, they both got watered. They both, everything else was exactly the same. But the
plants definitely react.
Right. So it's definitely, and I think it's starting to get into the sciencey thing, radar, of how powerful our words are, spoken or written, so anyway, I just thought that that was a really cool, and something that I agree with, and not to say that it's, by definition magic, writing, a fucking essay for your school is, you're, practicing magic because you're writing something. But, it's just, it is there, it's energy too. It affects things, your words. And that's why I say, don't negative talk yourself, because, those words have power. Exactly. So yeah, I think it's a really great thing. So yeah, I haven't, back to the, yeah.
We only needed a few weeks to figure it out.
Right? We got this shit. Just give us yeah, a couple weeks. We got it. Really more like 1 week to talk about it, a couple weeks to mull it over and realize how much we hated the original talk, and then re-talk about it, and then we got this.
We got it now, yeah. Well, I guess the thing then that's missing is then like what the next episode is going to be about, of like step by step, what does it mean to practice magic, and
see
what manifestation psychology is, and the difference between the like metaphysical manifestation and magic, which I think are two separate things.
Well, and see this is you tossing that out at the end of the last episode was really threw me off too, because to me, when our original discussion of our episode lineup, we're like, okay, magic and then manifestation, they go together. They can kind of work together, but again, like I said, I see them as two very different things, whereas you see them as the same, if not similar.
Well, I
mean, that was like, that totally threw me. I was like, well, I thought we were going to talk about manifestation, and you just want to talk more about magic, and
well, I think like one performs magic to manifest,
which
I think that the modern metaphysician focuses a lot of energy on manifestation outside of magic, and more in the realm of like pseudo psychology.
So that makes sense, that it's more of a talk of kind of the difference then, like you were saying, okay, well, this is just manifestation, this is manifesting with magic, or and like what's the difference, where that line is.
Clearly defining a line. And I mean, like most things in life, when you're talking about like the realm of the invisible, the line might not be so clear, but I feel like there's very clear examples of manifestation. Like I think that there's a difference between manifestation for abundance techniques as outlined by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill originated the like positive affirmation kind of movement in the early 20th century. And he's one of those where both self-help people and business people read his work as a means towards success, kind of like Carnegie's How to Win Friends and whatever, how to make friends and win arguments or something. I forget.
So
like I'm forgetting these titles, but
it's something like that.
Napoleon Hill is the pretty big one. Like they've even made like oracle card decks out of, make riches today or something. I think there's a big difference between following that path and then performing a prescribed set of actions as part of a spiritual tradition. Like there's two different mechanisms there, where one is lying more heavily on psychology and personal action, whereas I think on the other side, the magic side, is again like this admission of the power that is beyond you. in addition to taking steps, that there is always that outside influence you can appeal to for help. So, and I think that there's a big difference, and I would even argue that there might even be something more fulfilling to magic than just manifestation. And I mean that in a very like huge broad sense. I think it's just it's much more powerful in somebody's life when they are spiritually connected.
Right.
And that's why a lot of the like 12-step programs of getting away from addiction incorporate a religious element into it, of people who are humbling themselves and admitting that like the world and the universe is so much bigger than themselves, just tend to be more compassionate. And through that compassion and deep sense of humanity, they are able to surmount things that people who are really in tune with psychology of self and rational logical steps like can't necessarily overcome.
Right.
So that's kind of where I would take that there is something different.
Yeah, no, I like that. And again, I think it was just miscommunication
It was bad.
with us.
It was just like a bad vibe that
right.
day.
It was like we just had a bad connection, and you were off, I was off, and then the line was just not.
This is like magic, though. This is
right.
Like, we're doing it.
Okay, so yes, so for the next episode, I like that. I think going in that it's still manifestation, but it also gets into that definition, piggybacking off of the magic episode of, okay, well, is it magic? Is it not? Is it, and what, kind of defining that, and then maybe give some, information on how to, go about it or whatever. Okay, that feels a lot better now. And I definitely think, I feel a lot better with my understanding of our conversation from last time. And
this is a better segue.
Satisfied this time. And like I actually have some form. I might not have like a solid, like, boom, this is, now what I think or whatever, but I feel like I have a much more solid, like, piece of fucking fat to chew on, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's the important part of not necessarily having conclusions, because I feel like on topics that are truly this big, right? Like these topics are so much bigger than ourselves. I think it is important not to draw very firm conclusions until you've been exposed to enough stuff, and of course, like as time moves, more information comes to the surface, and just knowing what to keep your eyes open for. And
well, and that's really what life is too. It's like, because I've come to realize that in everything, that it's really hard to make that solid, line without seeing, all different parts of it, both sides, if you will. And not to say that you got to go out and practice magic to understand it, to know whether you want to do it or not, or if it's good or not, or whatever. But, just, I don't know. For me personally, I've seen so much of one-sidedness, I guess. And, all sorts of things, religion and relationships, everything. So yeah, to then, kind of know it's like, it's nothing's cut and dry. And I am Amber Nicole. You can find me at nature'slorepaths.com. At Nicole Desiree, you can find at Feloria.com, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm there, although I feel like I'm making more of a presence on our little growing website that I need to transition to themagicianstable.com officially. But right now we are like wixspace.com /Feloria dash in the all the other things. And I'm like, ooh.
Right. It's down below. You can find the link. I'm sure.
We'll be there.
All right. Well, till next time, y'all be good. And yeah, don't be practicing any bad magic. So
Yeah, bad. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, don't do that. No. All right. Bye.